My name is Evelyn Hartwell. I'm 66. Most days, I move slowly, speak softly, and try to keep my hands busy kneading dough, polishing the old table, keeping the rhythm of a house that's not really mine anymore. That morning, I was rolling out bread for dinner, the kitchen warm and smelling faintly of yeast, when I heard my daughter's voice drift from the living room. "Sweetheart, use Mom's card. She's been so generous. And there's enough to cover this for now." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The window above the sink rattled in the coastal wind, and I told myself it was just noise, maybe the TV. But then came Grant's voice, steady, easy. "You sure she won't mind I stopped mid-roll?" My fingers left white smudges on the counter, and the air felt too thin to breathe. "She won't," Sabrina said. "She lives here for free, eats our food, uses the car. It's the least she can do." The dough sagged under my palms, my own daughter, standing 10 feet away, talking like I was a burden she'd inherited instead of the woman who'd raised her through night shifts and hurricanes. The words settled into me like cold stones, each one heavier than the last. I didn't move, didn't say a word. I just listened as Grant asked for the PIN, and she gave it to him, those 4 digits she'd trusted me with for decades. The rolling pin slipped from my hand, hitting the counter with a dull thud. I could hear my heartbeat over the refrigerator's hum. Sabrina laughed. That soft, practiced laugh she used when she wanted something. "Go on, honey. Use it before she changes her mind." The room tilted. For a moment, I saw myself from far away, an old woman dusted in flour, standing in a kitchen she'd cleaned 1,000 times, realizing she was no longer part of her own family's idea of respect. I wiped my hands on my apron, careful not to leave fingerprints on anything. The smell of bread had turned sour in my throat. By the time the front door closed and their voices faded down the street, I already knew what I had to do. I washed my hands, dried them on the towel, and reached for the phone. The sound of their car faded down the street, leaving only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I stood there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, at the flour still dusted on my skin. My savings. $130,000. Every penny of it built with my hands. One shift. One cleaning job. One aching night at a time. When I was 23, I worked at the textile mill on Meeting Street, sewing seams for 12 hours straight. My fingers were always raw, the air thick with lint. I remember hiding folded bills in a biscuit tin under the bed, $10, sometimes $15, saved from each week's pay. I told myself that money was for the future, for a small place of my own when life finally settled. When the mill closed, I took cleaning jobs, houses with white carpets and marble counters, where women half my age called me sweetie and never learned my name. I scrubbed until my knees burned and my back locked, then came home and sewed curtains for neighbors to make a few extra dollars. I never wasted a cent. Not on shoes, not on vacations, not even on a decent mattress. After my husband died, I promised myself I'd never depend on anyone again. Every deposit into that account felt like a piece of safety, a quiet kind of hope. Over 4 decades of saving, praying, starting over. And now, my daughter, the one I worked all those years to protect, had handed it away like spare change. I sank into the kitchen chair and opened my hands. The flour was gone, but the years were still there, etched deep into every line of my skin. The next afternoon, The phone rang while I was folding laundry. I almost didn't answer, but Sabrina's name flashing across the screen made my heart tighten. I pressed the button and heard her voice, sharp and uneasy beneath the noise of a busy store. "Mom, did something happen to your account? The card's not going through." In the background, I caught the faint whir of scanners. Someone laughing. A cash register closing. Then Grant's voice, louder than hers. Irritated, "Try it again." "It's fine, she just probably forgot to move the balance." Forgot. The word cut like a blade. 40 years of saving. And he thought I'd just forgotten. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "What are you buying?" "Sweetheart," I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, just a few things for the house," Sabrina said quickly. Her voice trembled now. "A new TV, some appliances, a few upgrades we talked about." The sound of the cashier's voice carried through the line, polite, measured. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's showing as declined." For a moment, there was silence. I could almost see them standing there. Grant's jaw clenched. Sabrina's face burning under the fluorescent lights. All the while, I sat at the kitchen table at home, surrounded by the soft scent of detergent and clean sheets. "That's strange," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "Maybe the card's just tired." I heard her inhale sharply. "Mom, this isn't funny." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." There was another pause, the kind that says more than words ever could. Then a click, and the call ended. I set the phone down beside the folded towels and looked out the window. The afternoon sun spilled across the yard, catching the faint motion of the clothesline swaying in the wind. For the first time in years, the house felt entirely mind-silent, still, and somehow safe. Hours before Sabrina's phone call, I had already made my own. The bread was still cooling on the counter when I sat down with the bank's number written on the back of an old grocery receipt. My fingers trembled as I dialed. A young woman answered, bright, efficient, polite in the way people are when they can't see the weight of what you're about to do. "Mrs. Hartwell, how can I help you today? I need to block my debit card." I said. My voice sounded steady, though my heartbeat wasn't immediately. There was a short pause. Was it lost or stolen? I looked toward the living room, where the smell of perfume still lingered in the air. You could say, taken without my consent. The clerk didn't ask for details, just followed her script, confirming my identity, verifying the account. When she read the balance aloud, my throat tightened. I'd never heard the number spoken by someone else before it sounded so small out loud. So fragile. "All right, Mrs. Hartwell," she said finally. "The card is blocked. No further transactions will go through." "Thank you," I whispered. Then I stayed on the line a few seconds longer, just to hear her breathing, to be sure it was done. After I hung up, I walked to the porch. The Charleston air was heavy and sweet, carrying the faint brine of the river. Across the marsh, small lights blinked from distant docks boats rocking in the dark, steady and unbothered by the tide. I leaned against the railing, feeling the quiet settle inside me. For the first time in years, I'd chosen something for myself. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear anymore. It felt like the beginning of something honest, something that finally belonged to me. They came home just before dusk. I heard the car door slam. Then the sound of Sabrina's heels striking the porch steps like hammers. Grant followed close behind, his voice already raised before the door even opened. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" he shouted as he stormed into the kitchen. "We stood there for 20 minutes while the cashier kept saying your card was declined. People were staring at us like we were criminals. I was setting the table for supper, 2 plates. Out of habit. I didn't look up." "You embarrassed yourselves," I said quietly. Sabrina's face flushed crimson. "Mom, how could you do that? You live here for free. You don't pay bills. You don't pay the mortgage I turned then," meeting her eyes for the first time. "I pay. Sabrina, I pay with every dollar I ever earned. Every meal I've cooked. Every prayer I've said for you since the day you were born." She blinked, stunned for a moment, then scoffed. "You're being dramatic. We were just trying to make the house better for all of us. Grant was going to redo the kitchen. You'd have benefited too." Grant crossed his arms. "It's not like we were stealing. It's family money." "Family money," I repeated, tasting the words like something bitter. "The last time I checked, my name was the only one on that account." Sabrina stepped closer, her perfume sharp and expensive. "You don't understand how things work now. Mom, you can't just hoard money when we're all trying to build a life together. It's selfish." Something inside me, something long and quiet, finally snapped. I set the towel down and faced them both. "I raised you with nothing but love," I said. "I gave up everything so you could live easier than I did. And somehow, you turned that love into entitlement. You think because I'm older, I owe you what's left of me." Grant opened his mouth to argue, but Sabrina cut him off with a sharp glance. Her chin trembled, though she tried to hide it. "Mom," she said softly, "we didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." My voice was calm now, but firm. And that's the part that hurts. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint hiss of the kettle beginning to boil. I reached over and switched off the burner. Sabrina took a breath, ready to argue again. But I stopped her with one word. "No." It came out low, steady, final. It wasn't shouted, but it filled the room. The word hung there between us, heavier than anything else that had ever passed between mother and daughter. Then I turned away, folded the towel, and left the kitchen. Behind me, the silence closed in, thick and absolute, like a door finally shutting after too many years left open. The house was quiet after they went to bed, but it wasn't peaceful. Every sound, the creak of the hallway floor, the hum of the refrigerator felt like it was waiting for me to move. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the small suitcase I hadn't used since my husband's funeral. The zipper was stiff from disuse, but it still worked. I began with the simple things: clothes, toiletries. A framed photo of Sabrina as a little girl on her first day of school. She'd been missing her 2 front teeth, grinning up at me like the world was hers to hold. I traced the glass with my finger, then wrapped the frame in a scarf and set it gently between sweaters. The second suitcase took longer. I filled it with small pieces of myself, the quilt I'd made the year her father died, my sewing kit, a few recipe cards in my own handwriting, things that didn't look like much but carried a lifetime of hours. When I was done, I folded my apron and placed it on top. Downstairs, the kitchen still smelled faintly of the tea I never got to drink. I found a pen and an old grocery list on the counter. The words came without hesitation. I love you, but I love myself more. I left the note beside the salt shaker, where she'd be sure to see it in the morning, outside. The air was thick and warm, the sky a deep, soft gray over Charleston. I dragged the suitcases down the porch steps, one at a time, and loaded them into the back of my old sedan. My hands didn't shake anymore. By the time I reached Loretta's house, it was late. She saw me coming and stepped onto the porch. She opened the door, her robe tied loosely, eyes filled with quiet understanding. Without a word, she pulled me into her arms for the first and last time. I let myself cry for my daughter, for all the years that led here, for the woman I had finally decided to become. Loretta knew better than to ask questions. The next morning, she poured me coffee and said only, "We'll find you somewhere good." There was comfort in her quietness. It left room for my thoughts to settle. Over the next week, we drove through Mount Pleasant, across streets lined with live oaks and quiet ponds reflecting the pale blue of spring. Most of the homes were too big, too loud places built for people who still needed to prove something. I wanted smaller, simpler, a place that would hold silence kindly. When we found the condo near Shem Creek, I knew before we even parked. 2 rooms, a small balcony, sunlight in every corner. The realtor, a kind man named Mr. Dwyer, handed me the paperwork, his pen gliding across the final line with practiced ease. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hartwell," he said. "That's yours now." All the paperwork was signed. The condo was officially mine. His words caught somewhere deep inside me. I hadn't heard anything belong to me in a long time. My name, my home, my life all mine again. Loretta squeezed my hand as we stepped outside. "You did that," she said. "Not anyone else, the first night." I unpacked slowly. I hung the same photograph of Sabrina by the window, the one of her missing front teeth. But this time it didn't hurt to look at it. The space smelled of fresh paint and salt air drifting in from the marsh. I brewed a pot of coffee, the first in a kitchen that was entirely mine, and stood barefoot by the window as the world darkened into evening, across the water. Lights flickered from the shrimp boats, rocking gently at the docks. I held the new keys in my hand, their metal cool against my palm, and thought how strange it felt to be free at last. When dawn came, the sun rose in slow gold bands over the creek. I stood there, coffee warm between my palms, and whispered into the light, as if the morning could hear me. This time, I said softly, "I begin again." It had been nearly 3 months since I left. By then, I had learned the quiet language of solitude, morning walks along the marsh, evening coffee on the balcony, the comfort of choosing silence when words would only bruise. Loretta stopped by often with groceries or gossip, but most nights, it was just the sound of crickets and the gentle tap of the creek against the shore. That afternoon, the knock came as I was watering the small fern on my windowsill, 3 short raps, sharp but uncertain. I knew that rhythm before I even turned the handle. Sabrina stood in the doorway, her hair pulled back, face pale in the heat. She looked smaller somehow, though her perfume was the same, the one she wore when she wanted to seem composed. "Hi." "Mom," she said, voice catching on the second word. I nodded, but didn't move aside. "Sabrina." For a moment, she just stared at me. eyes flicking past my shoulder, taking in the modest apartment, the soft curtains, the second-hand furniture, the photo by the window. "So this is where you've been. This is home," I said. Her mouth tightened. "You could have at least told me where you went." "I had to hear it from Aunt Helen that you bought a place with cash. Do you know how that looked to me and everyone else?" I took a slow breath. "You made your own choices, Sabrina. I made mine." Her eyes filled, though she blinked fast to hide it. "You made me feel invisible, like my efforts never mattered." I set down the watering can. "You made me feel like I didn't exist," I said quietly. "Like I was a name on an account, not your mother." The air between us stilled. Outside, a heron lifted from the water, its wings slicing through the sunlight. Sabrina stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I just thought after everything you did for me, it was ours, not just yours." Tears slipped down her cheeks, unguarded now. I reached out, brushing one away with my thumb. Her skin felt warm, fragile, the way it did when she was a child. "I'll always love you," I said, my hand still resting on her cheek, but not at the price of losing myself. Her breath hitched, but she nodded. I could see the understanding forming, the slow, painful kind that comes when love collides with truth. I pulled her into my arms, held her long enough to feel her heartbeat steady against mine, then stepped back. I didn't invite her in. Some doors, once closed, stay that way for a reason. She lingered another moment, then turned and walked toward the stairs. I watched until her car disappeared around the bend. The light through the open door stretched across the floor, soft and golden. I stood there, hand on the frame, feeling both the weight and relief of what had finally been said. Weeks passed in a rhythm I hadn't known before, one not built on anyone's moods, but my own. I volunteered twice a week at the Mount Pleasant Literacy Center, teaching adults to read. Their quiet determination reminded me of myself at their age, stubborn, hopeful, always reaching for something better. In the afternoons, I walked by the water, watching the tides rise and fall like the steady breath of the world. I no longer carried the weight of expecting acknowledgement from anyone. The silence in my condo wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. One evening, I sat at the small desk by the window with my old leather journal. The last entry had been written years ago, when I still lived under Sabrina's roof. Now I turned to a new page and wrote. Slowly, but without hesitation, I thought I lost a daughter. But I found myself. The words looked fragile on the page, but they felt solid in my chest. I closed the journal and set it beside the lamp. Outside, the marsh shimmered in the fading light. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible. I felt free. A year slipped by quietly, marked not by calendars but by calm mornings and steady tides. One Sunday, as I poured my second cup of coffee, a soft knock came at the door. Sabrina stood there, holding a small paper bag from the bakery downstairs. No makeup, no perfume, just a softer version of the daughter I remembered, humbled by experience. "Hi, Mom," she said. "I brought muffins." I nodded, stepped aside, and let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes tracing the room as if memorizing it. For a long while, we didn't speak. The sound of the tide outside filled the silence between us. Finally, She said it, barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I looked at her, really looked at the tiredness, the regret, the hope trembling behind it all. I know, I said softly. And that's enough. She reached for her cup, hands shaking slightly, and we drank our coffee in quiet harmony. Outside, gulls circled over the water, and sunlight rippled across the glass. For the first time in years, the silence between us wasn't cold or heavy. It was gentle. It was peace.